Welcome to Losing Faith, Finding Spirit. I want to talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness is a concept that is deeply intertwined in religious, spiritual, and cultural aspects. The whole idea of forgiveness is that in order to relieve yourself of grief, of suffering, of resentment, and all of these icky, yucky feelings from being wronged by someone else, you have to forgive and forget. Let it go. And in order to do that, you, the victim, the person who has been wronged, has to be the one who lets it go. You have to do the action. You have to forgive. Now, when you put this concept of forgive and forget, turn the other cheek, so on and so forth, into the hands of an abusive person, of a toxic, narcissistic, abusive person, it becomes a weapon that is used against you. This becomes a permission slip for that person to continuously abuse and repeat the same patterns without making any changes. I know, I lived it. There was times when I was having some very deep discussions of what my needs were and why they were not getting met and how they could get met in the relationship, only to be met with the term, well, what about unconditional love? You're putting conditions on me. Or you need to forgive me and let it go. Or forgive your parents and let it go. Haven't you gotten over that yet? And even in the evangelical Christian church and church in general, the concept of forgiveness is a core value of Christianity. I mean, it is the core of their belief system, because the belief system is that everyone is born with sin or blemishes and ugliness and dirtiness. That is the nature, human nature, and that you need this God-made flesh, this spiritual being that put on a human body, came down to earth, lived a life, said a bunch of, deep messages, and then died. And their literal and figurative blood washes you clean, and now you can go into an eternal, wonderful afterlife. So the concept of forgiveness is what God forgave through Jesus, the God made flesh, the God in the human body who died and then came back to life to prove that he was God. So this whole concept of forgiveness really permeates the Christian church to the point where even within the church, it victim blames everyone. Like, you're the victim, but you're responsible for your forgiveness. You're responsible for your healing. When I agree that you are responsible for your healing. However, I feel like forgiveness and forgive and forget is very toxic when it comes to emotionally abusive relationships. Instead of forgiving, what you need to do is radically accept. So put away forgiveness and forget. Take on radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is when you look at your life as it is, without judgment, without wishful thinking, without hoping to make any changes. You just observe what it is and accept it. And you say, this is what it is. It is what it is. In the case of an emotionally abusive relationship, the very first step to healing is acknowledging the abuse. And that is very hard because many of us in these relationships self-blame. We blame ourselves for what is happening to us. And we take on the emotional responsibility of the relationship and do everything we can to change it. So the very first step is accepting that you are not responsible for that other person's changes. They are. You cannot change them. You have to accept that nothing you can do will change them. It's not about forgiveness, it's about acceptance. Once you acknowledge that there is no hope to make a change, no hope to fix them, then you can start seeing what is real. You can start accepting the reality that you are living in. And then once you break free of that reality and you start to see the patterns, the trauma bonds and the cycle of abuse that you are living in, and then the patterns that this person is using to manipulate, gaslight, and so on that we've talked about in the red flag series, then you can start changing it. That's when you start being able to disengage from those behaviors. You can stop taking part in those patterns. You no longer let the gaslighting bother you as much because you know that your truth is your truth and you don't have to prove it to anyone. That was a really amazing moment for me in my healing journey. And it was towards the end of the relationship. I remember we spent so many hours of our life, of our entire almost 20 years of being together, arguing over who said what. And then, which was now I know is just full on gaslighting. And so many hours. Towards the end, I started to realize that it didn't matter what I said or did. It didn't matter who said what. I know what happened. I know what I felt. I know what I said. I don't have to argue with somebody over what I said or did. So I stopped. He tried to bait me into an argument. He tried to be like, oh, you didn't say that, or why are you so angry? And I'd be like, I'm good. And then he'd push and try to get me into the, say, well, you shouldn't be so immature and you should be able to talk about it. No, I'm done. I'm done talking about this. And then I literally would turn it off inside my body. And he'd start being like, oh, you're breathing heavy and you're sarcastic. Did you roll your eyes? I can't tell you how many times he would tell me I rolled my eyes at him. I did not roll my eyes at you. You see what you want to see. I don't even care. And even if I did, so what? Let it go. So what? You're telling me to let it go all of the time, but you can't let it go. Very double standard. Anyways, not to get into that. It's, the mind games that you live through in these relationships are exhausting and detrimental to your mental health. And I recommend that as soon as you recognize and accept that what's happening in your life is abuse, start finding ways to recognize the patterns and break them. Break your part in the pattern. Stop reacting. It's very hard because if your abuser knows exactly all of your buttons to push, exactly what your triggers are. They've studied you. They've investigated you. They know your weaknesses and they will use them, and your vulnerabilities will be used. And that's what I'm saying, in the concept of forgive and forget within the Christian culture and within a lot of the societies that we live in, it really does victim blame. Because what happens is self-blamers who feel like it's their responsibility in the marriage or relationship will keep forgiving, but the other person will not change. You keep forgiving thinking maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe this time it'll be better. My core values say that I need to forgive and forget. Society says, the guru said, everybody says to let it go and forgive, forget, move on. Don't. Because you know what happens is if you keep doing that and the abuse doesn't stop, the person doesn't change, you are eroding your self-confidence, you're eroding your soul, your spirit, and you are losing trust in yourself because your boundaries are being crossed, you're being violated, you're being invalidated, and you're putting blinders on. Because when you forgive an abuser, the message you're giving them is that it's okay for them to keep abusing you. Think about that. When you tell them, okay, I'll let it go this time, it really upset me, but I'm going to forgive you and move on. I know I need to do that because I don't want to hold anger. I don't want to go to bed angry, whatever. And then the next day it happens again, or 2 days later, 3 days later, a week later, 2 weeks later. It happens again and again and again, and you keep forgiving, but they don't stop, and then they ratchet up a bit. They take it up a notch. They think if they got away with it that first few times, they're going to make it worse. And that's what happens to victims. When you forgive, you are giving them a permission slip to keep abusing you. So the other side of forgiveness is that inside of you, when you're in an abusive and toxic relationship and you keep going through these cycles and these trauma bonds and these patterns, you start resenting the person and yourself. You just like go further and further into that negativity and that resentment, and it builds. And you're dying in the relationship because nothing's changed. It doesn't stop. It doesn't get better. Forgiveness doesn't make it go away. So it's very important in a toxic relationship, in an abusive relationship, in a narcissistic relationship, to stop forgiving. Don't give them permission. Set a boundary. Don't let your resentment fester, because when you explode, when you get angry and you let it out, because that's what'll eventually happen, you'll let it out at some point, you're going to feel worse, and the abuser is going to use that against you again. Retroactive abuse. Anytime you throw a tantrum, it makes them feel like they can get away with 20 times worse. Believe me. You raise your voice just a little bit, they say you're screaming at them, and they will scream in your face. Lived it. Lived it. True story. You break a dish because you're so mad, they haven't let you alone, they wouldn't let you leave the kitchen, they wouldn't let you leave the house, and you throw a dish on the floor because you can't escape, and you're trapped. That gives them permission to tell you to leave the house, to kick you out, to do things against you, to break your stuff. You give an inch, they take 20 miles. I'm not even joking. I wish I was. I wish that was hyperbole. It is awful. You do not need to live in this kind of a situation. You don't have to forgive your abuser. And to those who have had physical violence against their bodies, you do not need to forgive that person. In fact, you are allowed to be angry at them for the rest of your life if you need to. Anger is not a bad thing. I don't know why in our societies and our cultures we've decided that fear and anger are negative emotions. They are not negative emotions. They are there to inform you of what is important and to protect you. Your anger is a message to tell you that a boundary needs to be set, that a violation has been happened. Anger is informing you that this is an important thing to you. This is something you're passionate about. You don't get angry over things that you don't care about. Your fear is to protect you. That is your instincts, that's your body explaining to you that you need to get out. And fear and anger go hand in hand. A lot of times we get angry because we're afraid. I can't tell you how many times, like the other day, my child ran out of their daycare and right into the street, and I started yelling their name and telling them to come back, and I was so angry and I was scared. I was angry because I was scared. Like, I can't believe you ran out into the street. We don't do that. You know better. Oh my gosh. Like, you could have gotten hurt. You could have gotten hurt. How did you not know? Like, the fear manifested as anger. So I want you to ask yourself too, before we move forward with our forgiveness and acceptance, if you feel angry all of the time, is the root of your anger fear? And if it is, what can you do to start making changes to get out of your situation so that you are no longer afraid? If you're afraid because of a certain person in your life, then you need to eliminate that person from your life. You don't have to forgive. You don't have to forgive. You definitely don't need to forget, because the more you forget and you forgive and you let things go, the more those people will use those against you and keep abusing you. Forget forgiveness. Start accepting, radically accepting your existence and your reality for what it is. And then you can make changes. You can learn how to adapt. You can learn to see the patterns that are happening. You can learn how not to react. Become aware of your body, become aware of your surroundings, become aware of the person. Start to accept the fact that this person is probably a traumatized child that never grew up. And that it's not about you, it's about them. And it's about their trauma that they can't heal. And that they are probably incapable of healing, incapable of the empathy of feeling what you feel, of realizing that what they do hurts you, because they are trapped inside of themselves and they can't get out. And they need intense therapy. You are not responsible to make them do that, because if you do, if you force them into some kind of therapy, if you force them to try to change, you are going to become the person that they lash out at, and they're going to resent you, because they are only going to feel more narcissistic shame. They're only going to feel more anger. They're only going to feel more upset because they don't want to change. Change has to come from within, and only the person can do it. You can't heal somebody else. You can't take the medicine for someone else to make them better. You have to do it for yourself. They have to do it for themselves. I hope this helps. I hope that you let go of your concept of forgiveness and move into acceptance, because eventually, down the road in your healing, as you've accepted things for what it is, it stops hurting. And your forgiveness, you don't even need it anymore because you just don't care. It becomes indifference. You really stop caring about the other person. And that's really the goal of forgiveness, is so that you're no longer like feeling the pain that you felt every time you see this person. When you accept it for what it is, the situation for what it is, the mental health issues for what they are, when you accept it and stop trying to change things, except for what you can change within yourself, stop trying to change the other person, you will move slowly and surely into that phase of healing where you feel indifferent and it no longer hurts. You no longer take those things personally. You no longer react to the same stimulus or triggers. You are free. That is the goal of forgiveness, and it can be achieved through acceptance. And that's what I want for you. I want you to start accepting things as they are, becoming aware, adjusting what you can within yourself, letting go of the other person, acknowledging that this is who they are and you cannot change them, acknowledging that it's about them and not about you, and breaking the patterns, becoming aware of those cycles and patterns in your life and how you're part in those patterns, how you can stop participating in them, and you will find your healing. Thank you for listening. Bye.